What up, everybody? Just sitting here, chilling out, looking over the landscape of the stories that I have before me, and I think I'm really gonna make a weekly show. But I do have a couple stories to run by. And I kind of feel like they're related, so we can just do them all at once, right? Um, a little bit of a little bit of an update on the Trump situation, where Trump promised Cory Gardner that he was going to sign some bill that comes up eventually, and we're going to find out more about that, I'm sure, as time goes on. Um, and yeah, let's check that out. But first, I seen this article in Herb magazine, and it was pretty cool, so I wanted to go ahead and read it because I have some thoughts on it. So it's called "The Four Biggest Barriers to Marijuana Legalization According to Harvard." And yeah, this is some stuff I touch on all the time. And it's not only why marijuana can't get legalized or whatever. It's why nothing that the people want to do ever gets done in the government anymore. We don't own the government. The government is owned, but not by us. And they work for the people that pay them the most. All we do is vote for them. So let's check this out. Despite widespread citizen support for medical marijuana, which is now legal in some form in more than half of the U.S., cannabis remains illegal on the federal level. Some advocates believe that the end of prohibition is inevitable. But according to Harvard Political Review, there still remains substantial barriers to nationwide legalization. Here's what they are. Now, when I read these, don't laugh, because I mean, you don't have to be a Harvard scholar to know that this is why and this is who and all that. So here we go. Legalization requires research, and research requires legalization. Number one reason. The old catch 22 of Schedule 1. One of the parameters around Schedule 1 is that it has no known medical use. So to overcome that obstacle, you would have to do some research that the government recognizes as research, and quite frankly, you can't do that. It Part of the reason is because that's part of the Controlled Substances Act clause, is you can't do research on stuff that's a Schedule 1 drug. That don't make any sense, because I guess it's just to remain ignorant. You think something's a certain danger or whatever, so you're just going to be like, that's off the table. It's a pretty bad place to put something. So, you would seem like you would have to have enough research to put it in there in the first place, not just a bunch of hearsay testimony and junk science. So let's go ahead and read it. Firstly, one of the main reasons cannabis remains a Schedule 1 drug under the federal government's Controlled Substances Act is that the FDA continuously refuses to approve marijuana as a form of medication. Ironically, the FDA has approved synthetic alternatives like Marinol and Syndros, which attempt to recreate the therapeutic benefits of cannabis, but which also present a number of potentially devastating side effects not present in marijuana. And whenever we say marijuana when talking about cannabis, what we do mean is the whole plant, everything involved, smokable form of the plant, and basically smoking it, because that's the illegal part of it that made them call it that. So that's why we use that word. As Harvard outlines, the FDA approval process for research is complicated and restrictive. The FDA traditionally reviews the findings of outside research firms. But because of these, outside research firms must work around the federal government's classification of marijuana as a Schedule 1 drug, this research remains difficult to conduct and therefore scarce. Unless you can afford to do it in a foreign country, and even then you have to get FDA approval, which, we've seen that happen with the people that make the mouth sprays and stuff. The Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, also presents a major research barrier according to the Harvard Political Review. The agency has consistently blocked efforts for cannabis research, such as the University of Massachusetts' request to open a cannabis research facility. This issue is a result of the agency's classification of cannabis as a Schedule 1 drug under the Controlled Substances Act, like I said. As such, cannabis is considered by the agency to have no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. Other Schedule 1 drugs include substances like cocaine, opioids, and methamphetamines. Meanwhile, the federal government holds a patent on marijuana entitled Cannabinoids as Antioxidants and Neuroprotectants, which contradicts any claim that cannabis has no currently accepted medical use. Big Pharma, number 2, is number 1 when it comes to the people that are keeping it illegal with the money, all right? And the reason is because, like I always say, they know that medical marijuana works, and all they sell is a bunch of remedies that don't actually work, but they're like temporary fixes, and they have a lot of side effects. And if you take too many of their pills at once, you probably are ruining your body. So it's just permanent damage. You can't reverse it, and we know that. You know, they keep acting like marijuana, we need more research and all this shit. We know what the long-term effects of smoking weed is. How do we know that? Because we can look around and see people like me who's been smoking weed for decades. You know, you think there's something wrong with me? I think I'm a pretty clear-thinking person with a pretty decent level of intelligence. I mean, I went to school a lot, if that means anything to you. But really, I mean, what does all that matter, you know? The bottom line is we know what long-term effects are on pharmaceutical drugs, because we see that too. We see that all over the place. We know what doing, heavy-duty regimens of different pills causes lots of side effects, causes people to have to, it causes damage to all your organs and stuff. So whatever, anyway, they're threatened. Another major barrier to cannabis research identified by Harvard Political Review is the influence of Big Pharma on lawmakers in the United States federal government. Influence as in suitcases full of money every time they go up for a re-election. The pharmaceutical industry outlobbies every other industry in the country, having doled out roughly $2.6 million in lobbying expenditures between 1998 and 2012. Big Pharma's war against the legalization of cannabis comes with the financial incentive, says Harvard, as legal cannabis could poach billions of dollars of revenue from major pharmaceutical companies, especially in the pain sector. And I mean, that's the number one area where they fight to try to get that not a condition that you can get, your certification for medical marijuana in medical marijuana states. Since a number of studies show promise for cannabis as a treatment for conditions and illnesses formerly treated with pharmaceuticals like chronic pain, anxiety, sleep disorders, it's likely that many patients will swap out pharmaceuticals for medical marijuana. This trend has already begun to take place in legal marijuana states. And I was over on Twitter earlier, and I noticed that they're pushing this new narrative that, cannabis isn't good for sleep apnea or any sleep disorders, really. And it's just another fear-based propaganda type situation, so they have no real studies or anything like that, as usual. And that's the big problem. If we go back to number 1, we don't have the studies. Damn it. But you know who else don't have the studies? They don't have the studies. So just remember that anytime you hear all this negative rhetoric or negative propaganda or what we call reefer madness, just keep in mind at all times that they have just as many studies as we do, which is 0 actual studies. So every time they go make a claim like, oh, marijuana makes you, you smoke it and it makes you dumb. It lowers your IQ. Well, you don't have any studies to back that up. Oh, yeah, we do. There was this correlation study where they looked at like 5,000 cases of people that smoke chronic marijuana, supposedly. No, you don't have that. You don't have actual people that did that because you don't have, it's all hearsay. It's all correlative studies. We're not allowed to use that to make claims, as you just heard from in this article talking about the FDA. So they shouldn't be allowed to make those claims either, but they do, and it's because all they have to do is use fear to keep the status quo. Law enforcement pressures politicians, and by pressure we do also mean we have the police unions and all these people and current police. They're heavily invested. They're always talking about, how marijuana, they use the reefer madness fear-based propaganda just as much as anybody else, because they know that it's a major part of their operation, and it just seems to them like, what are we going to do if that's not there? And not only that, but they love to take away your rights. When they find you with weed, that's the first thing that happens, is all your rights go out the window. So let's see what they say. Harvard also claims that the United States law enforcement practices are a major barrier to cannabis research and legalization. This is partially has to do with the political power that an endorsement for a sheriff or district attorney can have for someone running for local political office, bypassing this constituency by opposing law enforcement agencies' position on marijuana can be, in other words, political suicide. That's not to say that whenever you see police retire, then they become anti-prohibitionists. And there's a whole organization called LEAP that is dedicated to just that. Former police officers that are against prohibition. Law enforcement against prohibition. And it's not always former law enforcement that's involved with LEAP. Private prisons oppose legalization. Well, we knew that, right? Finally, the Harvard Political Review claims that the private prison industry is one of the political barriers standing in the way of marijuana legalization and research. And people underestimate that. It's so bad. Their lobbying against marijuana is so bad and has so much influence that even the people that are the food providers in prisons, like in Arizona, the food providing corporation that provides food for prisoners, literally put one of the top amounts of money against legalization in Arizona. Prop 205, I believe it was, in 2016. Currently, 1 in 5 people incarcerated in the United States were charged with nonviolent crimes. Without marijuana prohibition, this number would decrease significantly, hindering profits for private prison companies. These profits can be hundreds of millions of dollars. And I seen actually it was some senator was basically butting heads with Kevin Sabat, who was butting heads with the claim that there's a lot of people in prison for weed possession. Now, the thing about that is a lot of times it's like they say, like you get caught with it and it's just like it could be your third offense on something or whatever. There's a lot of reasons why people do actually go to jail and sometimes prison if it's your third felony or some shit like that. Whatever the case may be, when you go to the courthouses and look at the dockets and see the sheer amount of marijuana cases that there always is, you have to believe that a lot of people are sitting in a lot of jail cells somewhere with marijuana charges pending or doing time for marijuana charges that they just got. Now, are we saying that it's all prison and federal prisons and all this? Maybe, maybe not. We have seen them cases, though. We've seen several of those cases. In fact, a gentleman just got out of, I think he was in for 9 years on just a couple of joints again. So this is just, we see it. It's not like it doesn't happen, and it's not like the numbers aren't staggering. So if it's not that big of a deal, Kevin Sabat and all you people that are like pushing back against the notion that there's a lot of people that are in prison and jails for marijuana possession, if you don't think that's such a big deal, then why is it that the private prison lobby is so intent on lobbying against the legalization of marijuana? Can you tell me? I don't really understand that. Now, a lot of these government agencies and law enforcement agencies and whatnot, they get a lot of funding to fight the quote-unquote drug war. And when they see what they're doing with that funding and they evaluate it, they realize that marijuana is a big part of why they get that funding. Either the government that gives them the funding, which is usually the federal government, or any government higher than them, like the state government if you're a local municipality, however it works. You know, to impress them, either they want to see certain numbers in certain things like marijuana numbers, and I'm not saying it's a quota system. I'm just saying if you want to get your funding, you got to make some things happen. All right. What now? It is the United States Congress is ultimately responsible for legalizing marijuana, as Harvard notes. Big Pharma has given more money to elected officials than any other industry since 1998, targeting both Democrats and Republicans evenly. What makes these barriers to entry so frustrating to cannabis proponents and their seemingly blatant disregard for public opinion? Exactly. According to a Quinnipiac University poll, national poll, 94% of voters believe that medical marijuana should be legalized. In other words, if the decision were left up to the American voters, medical marijuana would surely already be legal. So, and on that note, we remember when over here this headline, Trump just promised to support a bill giving states the right to legalize cannabis. Let's see how that's going. So this is Tom Angel, and by the way, that last writer was Rob Hoffman. Not sure if I've read him before or not, but I always like to give the writers credit. That was a great piece. And so now we're over here at Marijuana Moment with Tom Angel, and we have Rohrabacher pushes new marijuana bill in wake of Trump pledge. Okay. One of Congress's leading proponents of marijuana law reform, a key Trump ally, announced he will soon be filing new legislation in line with the president's pledge to support changing federal cannabis laws. Now, again, like I did the whole clip about just this, I don't know if this is gonna. It doesn't matter what you do. Is this gonna pass? You know, like there's so many. We have the 8 Republicans that are always standing in the way to try to prevent things from getting passed or whatever. So what do we got here? I'm extremely happy that President Trump has made perfectly clear that he meant his campaign promise to respect state laws with regard to marijuana. Now, there should be no question in Attorney General Jeff Sessions' mind about the president's intention. Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, a Republican from California, said in a press release. And one more note about this bill coming forward is, again, we see Republicans stepping up on this issue where Democrats haven't. Like in Florida, we had that Matt Gaetz guy get up on the floor and just like preach the gospel about medical marijuana. We have Mitch McConnell dropping the hemp bill. And the speech he gave on that was basically every talking point I've ever said about hemp. You know, we have former Speaker John Boehner. Obviously, he's just trying to cash in, and maybe that's what it all is. But the bottom line is the cashing in is available for Democrats too, and so is the getting votes on a populist issue. So I don't know what the hell is going on here. Oh, I know what it is, because you look at California and you don't see any Democratic politicians that are really out front in this issue. And if they are, it's tepid support because of one reason or another, like Kamala Harris. Well, she has ambitions to run for president in 2020, so that's why she's trying to embrace the issue, but clearly she's falling on her face every 5 minutes. And now she's like, oh, well, you know, I'm going to take some super PAC money. So that's the whole problem. That goes back to the barriers that we have to legalize marijuana and the barriers we have to everything else that the people want. You know, that's what it is people that say, oh, I'm going to take the money. Well, we don't want you to take the money. We want you to help us. How are we going to vote for someone that's going to legalize marijuana if both parties are full of prohibitionists? And how is the Congress going to get it done if you guys got too many people with, you know, your pockets being stuffed with big pharma money or prison lobby money or whatever? So I don't have a whole lot of faith in this getting through. But again, thank you for the Republicans for finally somebody stepping forward and grabbing this issue by the bull horns. And even if you have to be a former politician like Boehner, he stepped to the left of almost every Democrat that's sitting in office right now by saying deschedule. I know it's a hard word to say. I mean, it's, what is it, 3 syllables? Deschedule. It could be 4 syllables. Deschedule. Depends on how much you emphasize that last "ual." And if you don't want to deschedule, you want to reschedule. And we don't like the idea of rescheduling in the movement, because rescheduling would basically churn a lot of medical marijuana programs into even more garbage than they already are. And if you reschedule, then you still have this whole cloud hanging over recreational marijuana, because now you have something that you're saying is a Schedule II drug because of some reason or another, but yet we're over here selling it out the door like it's beer. Now, you wouldn't like that if it was Xanax or any other Schedule II drug, but then again, I don't really think it really matters. I mean, like I don't feel like the scheduling thing is a very American thing. The Controlled Substances Act, I think it's bullshit. So that's my opinion on that. So let's get back to the article here. This is a fundamental issue, Rohrabacher says, of federalism and freedom, as state after state moves to take marijuana out of the hands of the cartels and place it in the competitive market where consumers can be assured of product safety. It also encourages more exploration of medical uses of cannabis, which have shown unquestionable promise in the treatment of multiple ailments and disorder. U.S. Senator Cory Gardner, Republican from Colorado, again, he's the one that held Trump appointees hostage. Usually that kind of obstruction only happens from, this two-party system. It's usually them fighting each other. Here we have Cory Gardner, another Republican, doing drastic measures to try to help protect his marijuana businesses back at home. Where you at, Dianne Feinstein? What, Nancy Pelosi? Don't you guys care about your people back home, or you're just, the only people you care about are your donors? That's right, I forgot. That's why we can't get anything done. That's why we can't have nothing nice, anything. Anyway, Gardner announced late last week that Trump is in support of passing legislation to protect state cannabis laws from federal interference. Quote, I look forward to working with President Trump and Senator Gardner to move any legislation through Congress, Rohrabacher said. Quote, the authors of our great Constitution most assuredly would approve. The congressman's new Cannabis States' Rights Act would make restraint on federal enforcement permanent, the release said. The proposal would be similar to legislation that Rohrabacher already introduced this Congress, known as the Respect State Marijuana Laws Act, which says the Federal Controlled Substance Act should not apply to any person acting in compliance with state laws relating to the production, possession, distribution, dispensation, administration, or delivery of marijuana. The new bill will add broader language protecting people complying with the laws of the Indian tribes, not just states. So that's pretty cool. If it's legal under the state law, it's legal under federal law. Rick Dykema, the congressman's chief of staff and legislative director, told Marijuana Moment in an interview. The language will also be tightened a bit to clarify that the bill doesn't prevent federal authorities from enforcing the law on federal land, even if the land is within the borders of the state that has legalized cannabis, Dykema said. Dykema? Anyway, adding that it is expected to be filed within the next week or two. Oh, so they're getting right on it. That's another thing that I said had to happen if this is going to happen. Because legislative sessions, not Jeff Sessions or Pete Sessions, legislative sessions don't last forever, and we're kind of getting deep into this one already. So I'm kind of skeptical as to whether or not this can get done. But You know, this is just judging on the molasses speed of the turtle government that we have before us, that we've seen operate, gee, since I can remember. I mean, the obstruction started early on in the Obama era, and it's just been a back and forth, like, little kid game, little playground bullshit. So the current bill has 45 co-sponsors, and Akima said his office is working to line up as many as possible of those to sign on to the new legislation. Rohrabacher has been one of the most consistent advocates for cannabis law reform on Capitol Hill and is a co-author of a current federal spending rider that prohibits Justice Department interference with state medical cannabis laws. And again, in case you didn't hear it or catch it, this new one applies to, obviously, recreational as well. Basically, like it says, if it's legal where you're at, then the federal government will consider it legal under this new situation. So, like I said before in my last video about this, we can only hope for the best. That's all we can do. The government is quite fractured, different factions, however you want to put it. It's like that in both parties, and both parties have never been more divided between, each other. Although it seems like Republican agendas seem to get enough Democratic votes every time. So we'll see about this. I don't consider this a Democratic agenda type thing, although it should have been. I mean, isn't that the liberal position, is to protect states? States' rights has always been a Republican thing, but they only seem to use it when it's like for bigoted reasons, like they don't like gay marriage, or they want to have, minorities count jelly beans in a jar in order to vote. So that's that. We'll keep following that as it develops. And then finally, to top this all off, I'm going to go ahead and plug once again my article over here on Steemit. The article is entitled Overkill, Police Brutality and Corruption in the War on Drugs. And it's a pretty hard-hitting article. I would have to almost put a trigger warning on it, because it's pretty explicit what the police are doing to us in the name of the war on drugs. So if you're interested in reading, it's a pretty long read. Well, I mean, it's 3,800 words, so it's a little bit longer than your average Newsweek article. So, yeah, head on over to Steemit. And when you go to Steemit, I guess we should just go here. Yeah, go to Steemit/@TrollDozer. Little secret, I'm TrollDozer. And there's a little story behind why I had to pick a different name other than the Daily Dope up here. But it's fine. I don't mind. I really don't care. I just have a place to put stuff like that now. And I also upload some videos on DTube once in a while, just to try to get my foot in the door there as well. So swing on over and check it out. And that's all I got on this. Again, let me remind everybody one more time. The feds want input on this whole situation, where the United Nations wants input. So the FDA wants you to give them input, and then they'll give the input to the United Nations. I'll put the link for this in the description, and I'm going to make a video right now real quick where I'm just going to go through and read some of these comments just for the hell of it, to try to encourage people to do this some more. And yeah, that's all I got. I'll see you again next time. Like I said, I probably won't do a weekly show this week, because there really isn't nothing left after I tore it up with DC420 over there on their weekly show on Sunday. And if you didn't watch that, I will put the link to that in the description once again. That's all I got. Have a good one. See you next time.